in a way, there is a danger of oversupplementing a child with probiotics or even adults, right? If it colonizes, it may hamper the natural diversification that you want in a kid who's eating solids and exposed to a lot of different environmental microbes. So now we have the technology. We should test, not guess, when you supplement, right?
Yeah, that's such a key phrase. Like, do not guess, because if you guess, you're most likely going to be wrong unless you have actual data, quantified data to make real data-driven decisions from. It's so funny. People, they stock their pantry. So they know when they look in their pantry, I have this many cans of beans, I have this. Why don't we take an inventory of what's going on in us? It's the same exact thing. So if you're a parent or if you're just somebody that wants a healthy gut, take an inventory.
Especially probiotics, right? When, it's like, is every probiotic supplement equal? No, they're not equal, right? There are some really clinically backed strains. It comes down to the strain level. So make sure if you're taking a probiotic, you are looking at clinically backed strains. And then what some companies do is they kind of like, oh, these are all clinically backed strains individually, and they mix it together and think that the gut will, it will survive the gut. When you take that pill, the capsule is supposed to also protect the probiotic strains until it reaches the gut. But not all capsules are made equal. Some capsules just dissipate quickly. And certain good bacteria, as I mentioned earlier, if they're exposed to oxygen, they die. So most probiotics don't get to your gut, right? So they're not all equal. You have to find a legitimate company and brand. And I am actually pretty proud because we are the first consumer company that launched strain tracking. So if you are taking a probiotic supplement, you can see that strain colonizing your gut if it's meant to colonize. So, if your child is, if you're giving your child an infant probiotic, you will probably see that strain in their gut if it's working. We have seen some probiotics just never colonize, and we have that data because we have so much data now. And there's one company, I'm not going to name it, that uses water as the medium. And we think that the water is killing the bacteria. So we don't recommend that brand anymore. But from our data, we actually can see what actually works and what doesn't work. So we're trying to bring more transparency to the supplement industry because there's a lot of snake oil. There's a lot of claims that are not FDA approved or regulated. But because we have the sequencing technology and a strain capacity, we can tell, we can show that.
Cheryl, I think people would literally drop their jaw to the floor if they realized how much money they were wasting on supplements. I read some data a past week ago that we basically absorb maybe 20%, sometimes 40% of the supplements that we eat because they go through the HCl in the gut and it just basically liquefies and we never actually get it. So my friend Alex from this company Eons, shout out to Eons, they developed this technology called Quick Zone where you put it under your tongue and it gets directly into your bloodstream. So powerful. And I'm wondering like, oh my gosh, can we just do this for all supplementation? Because it's almost like bypassing the gut. This is why IVs are so popular because they don't have to go through that traditional system. What do you make of that for probiotics? Do you think that probiotics and gut health supplements could ever do what they're supposed to do without being swallowed?
I mean, there's suppositories for the vaginal microbiome. So there are different routes, but by and large, I mean, the oral route is the easiest, right? But there are differences in capsules and quality and the different strains in it. Like I said, different strains have different functions. You can't just expect to take an off-the-shelf formulation, and it depends what you're looking to fix, right? What are you deficient in? Like there's this notion of like, let me just take one a day for good health, but do you really need it, right? I mean, I have a more natural philosophy in terms of like a lot of these things you can do through diet. So increasing fermented foods, but again, not all fermented foods are equal, right? You can buy very sugary yogurts that may have a counter effect if they have emulsifiers and added sugar and things like that. Like your Danone yogurt. We make our own kefir from our own grains, our own kefir grains, right? It has way more natural probiotics in it than a store-bought one. So there's a lot of things that, I think you can maintain through diet and health, a well-balanced diet. But I do think you should check in. If there are deficiencies, then sometimes supplementation can get you back to a baseline that you want. And then you have to maintain it through diet, right? So I'm off that philosophy rather than just popping pills every single day, hoping that would fix your issues.
I think we have this bias where as long as we're being like a good little boy and a good little girl and taking our vitamins, I mean, look at the conditioning that's happening in our world right now. Look what happened in 2020, the reason that we moved out here. There is a war for the mind, and that war is coming a lot of times from financial interest about you should buy this product because it benefits this company the most. So this company is going to feed that information to the media, specifically Super Bowl commercials, and look at all this stuff. I mean, what's going on with the pharma industry, advertising on television. There's another way. There's another game we can play. And that game is actually where you just take your health in your hands and you do something every day, even if it's just you exploring something like getting some chickens or, trying to sprout some grains or having kefir. Like, there's so many things that people can do. I wonder though for this, and this is something that I know so many moms deal with. I've seen this in our forums. I've had moms email me this, especially when we did some of the content around our birth stories for Carrie Michelle when she had her VBAC. For the moms that have cesareans, what is the repair process for the baby's gut?
Yeah. So we now have the C-section signature in our reports because that was the thing I read, where if it's removed by 1 year, the asthma risk is reduced by 3 times. We have that indicator. So there are ways you can restore that. And we see that so easy to restore in our moms and parents. Breastfeeding is the number one most restorative. Again, I would encourage mom to also check in because most of the time, if you did have a C-section, you would have gone through the operation and you were exposed to antibiotics, right? So bifidobacteria is the most important bacteria in the first year of life for your baby. And it's also the most sensitive to antibiotics. So usually in even adults, right, if you take a round of antibiotics, most likely your BIFs are gone and wiped out. And it's really hard to restore that. Again, mine was 0. It took me 6 to 9 months of really hard work to get that back up to like 8%, right? And in infants, you should see about 50 to 90% of BIFs in the first year of life, actually. So that is really the number one thing you want to see. I specifically want to see Bifidobacteria infantis in my child because that's the most efficient at digesting the HMOs in breast milk. There's 4 strains, basically, B infantis, B breve, B longum, and B bifidum. Hopefully this is not too crazy
Very
scientific.
Yeah.
Yes, it's these are the 4 most important microbes that you want to see in your child.
Okay.
And so there are ways. So if mom had one of these 4, she will pass it on through her breast milk, hopefully. And we've seen a lot of that in our tests. If mom doesn't have it and baby doesn't have it, then a probiotic, a high quality probiotic that has one of those strains or a combination of those strains will be important to supplement to baby. And then once your baby, and a lot of C-section born babies or even just babies exposed to antibiotics through NICU or whatever ear infections, they have 0. And within 1 month of supplementation, they go from 0 to 90% bifidobacteria. And when that happens, it really crowds out the pathogenic bacteria. So all the E. coli type bacteria is pushed out and symptoms do go away. So we see, although we see initial symptoms where if you imagine 9 out of 10 seeds are E. coli type bacteria and the good bacteria is coming in and fighting the bad bacteria, pushing it all out. Initially, the baby's going to feel discomfort and, kind of like we get reports of like extra gassiness, stool being really, really off. Yeah. But we do tell them with their physician's approval, of course, to persist 1 to 2 weeks with careful monitoring and start them with a lower dose to start them with half the dose and increase it slowly. Because your gut, your baby's gut is trying to like completely change out who's in charge, right? Who's in the baby's gut. But that, is really crucial in the first 6 months, first 12 months of life. And it's very easy to get that. I also want to mention, you mentioned a lot about the healthcare system and all that. And I want to talk a bit about antibiotics, right? Because, I forget what the stats are, but something like an average kid gets 2 rounds of antibiotics in the first year of life because of ear infections. And ear infections are like so common these days. I'm not sure if your kids have had it.
No, thank God, knock on wood. We've not gotten them any jabs, no vaccines, nothing. They're purely natural children.
Yeah, any medication may have side effects, right?
Yeah.
And these BIFs are so sensitive to medication, like including maybe, I don't want to get to the vaccine discussion, but antibiotics could just wipe it out, and it's really hard to bounce back
Yeah.
if you don't do some restoration. But here's the fact. Most ear infections are viral. They're not even bacterial. But if you just take your child to your pediatrician, they're going to say, take antibiotics, right? Because I'm thankful both my kids had no ear infections at all until recently. So when my son is 3.5 years old, finally he had an ear infection. So I took him to the Minute Clinic. And the first thing the nurse said was like antibiotics. And like, how do you know it's bacterial? Because I know what questions I should ask, right? And she's like, we don't, but just in case. And then, does he have an ear infection in the other ear?
Let's destroy his gut just in case.
She didn't know anything about gut health, right? And so I'm like, she told me if the ear infection is in one ear but not the other ear, is bacterial. So then I'm like, oh, really? So I texted my advisor, my medical advisor, Dr. Cheryl Sew, who's, functionally trained. She's a pediatrician in California. She's like, there's no such thing. There's nothing in medical literature that says if it's one-sided, it's bacterial. So in fact, she was like, here's what I would do. She gave me this whole protocol of increases vitamin C by 10x, 10,000 milligrams throughout the day. And you have to do it every hour because vitamin C dissipates quickly. Increases vitamin D and, vitamin A. And I had this whole list and herbs and things like that. When I finally bought all those supplements, it cost me $200. And the antibiotics that the nurse prescribed was $3. So it is interesting, right? Like we are getting subsidized for antibiotics, right? Medication. And of course, in some instances, if you do get strep throat, you do need antibiotics, and that could be life-saving. But I think you need to advocate for, you need to do your own research, right? And unfortunately, the healthcare system doesn't reimburse supplements, but, I'm fortunate to be able to afford it, but not every family can.
Yeah.
So I persisted. I fed him all the supplements. It was painful. And sometimes I doubted myself. Should I give it to him? Because I had that in hand, the antibiotics. But I'm like, I went by my gut. I felt like he was improving. And someone even told me, the nurse told me, even giving my child antibiotics, it would take him a few days to feel better because that would take time to take effect. So I'm just going to wait. So I told myself, I'm just going to wait. And he did improve and nothing happened.
Yeah.
And then a week later, I think I got ear infection too. And I did the same protocol. I had the same supplements. And I did the same thing. I went to my doctor and I was prescribed antibiotics, but persisted. And so now I'm like, a lot of parents just need tools, right? They just it's really scary in that time point where you're seeing your child cry and suffer.
It's
and
the worst.
In pain.
I'll do anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we, it's not, again, like doctors are there for a good reason. But if that's the only thing you're prescribed, then that's what you're going to do. So we don't blame people for, and again, sometimes it is needed, right? Just like my C-section was really needed.
Yeah.
But if parents are equipped with education, like, is it really bacterial? Is it viral? Could it be viral? And have the toolkit and the confidence that if I give my kid these supplements and I'm seeing him improve, then I have confidence that he's going to get better, right? So I would have averted to giving him antibiotics. But if I had to give him antibiotics, I have his baseline sample from before. And I can take a sample 4 weeks post antibiotics and see how much his gut health was affected, and then figure out how to get him back to baseline, right?
Sure.
What was there before and now missing because of the treatment, and guide me to it. So that's what we want to be. We want to be a resource for parents, not to name or shame and not to point fingers and anything. Is to give you the data to empower you to make these decisions, right? I'm a data geek. So to me, more data is better, and I know what to do from there.
Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Click the link if you want to watch the full episode, and I will see you in the next video.